If you folks could move into the middle a little bit, we've just got a few more folks that we're going to try and find seats for. We'd appreciate it. We apologize for the late start. There are a few seats over here. I got four or five seats over here if you want to come around through the front.
No, but sit behind me.
Right down here.
It's not that long, it's just that I had to make the letters big.
Oh, I know. I usually use cheaters.
I
didn't
have
bring 'em
the
with.
cheaters, but
I am honored tonight to welcome all of you here to the Rosenmeier Forum on what promises to be a most interesting, informative forum on race relations in the Brainerd Lakes region. We here at the Gordon Rosenmeier Center for State and Local Government are grateful to Central Lakes College for the 32 years of support it has given us to honor the legacy of Senator Gordon Rosenmeier, who so ably and effectively and most powerfully represented Crow Wing and Morrison counties in the Minnesota legislature. I will now call on our panel's moderator and longtime journalist at the Brainerd Dispatch, now retired, Mike O'Rourke, who will introduce our distinguished panel. Thank you to all of you for coming, and Mike, you take it from here.
Thank you. Welcome to our forum on race relations in the Brainerd Lakes area. This is not going to be the definitive conversation on race. Our goal is to present perspectives from 4 different individuals of color, and maybe we'll learn a few things this evening. A quick reminder, we're following the CLC protocols on masks. Our panelists are masks, and we appreciate you in the audience. We appreciate your cooperation on that. There will be a segment where our panelists will be coming to the podium, and they'll be distanced, and they'll be allowed to take their masks off if they choose to do so. The panelists are Dr. Clarabelle Severson. I'll start here on your right, I believe. Dr. Clarabelle Severson, a mental health therapist. James Russell, Charles Black Lance, who is a member of the Brainerd School Board and Director of Academic Support Programs here at Central Lakes College. Then we have Toy Ross Sullivan, CLC Raider Connect coach, and James Russell, head basketball coach and athletic director here at CLC. During the first segment, the panelists will talk about their origins and their current lives. They'll also be asked about their experiences, both good and bad, which were related to their race. In the next segment, I'll have a few questions for them. And finally, we'll open up the forum to hear your questions, your written questions. Some of you folks might have received a piece of paper to write questions on. We'll have board members who will be picking those up, and we'll try to get them, I'll read them to the panel. So I would ask Dr. Severson if you would be first.
I want to make sure I don't fall. Okay. So I brought something to read because I can't remember all of this. Hello, my name is Clarabelle Severson. I'm a mental health provider at The Therapist, a private practice here in Brainerd. I have lived in the Brainerd Lakes area since January of 2009. Prior to moving here, I lived in Florida for several years. I have also lived in several other states and a different country while I was in the military. Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I am of Puerto Rican descent, born in New Jersey. My parents migrated to New Jersey individually when they were in their late teens. They did so to seek better economic opportunities. Although I was born in New Jersey, my parents were not native English speakers, so Spanish was my first language and the primary language spoken in my home. I learned English once I was enrolled in grade school in New Jersey, and as a result, I am fluent both in Spanish and English. When I was 9 years old, my family moved to Puerto Rico. As Puerto Ricans, we are very proud of our cultural heritage, and for the most part, we maintain and pass along our traditions regardless of birthplace. This includes pride of our Caribbean culture, language, food, and tradition. And it is likely that if you meet someone from Puerto Rican descent, they will speak about their culture and probably be in possession of a Puerto Rican flag. Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, much like the U.S. Virgin Islands, Samoa, and Guam. In 1917, through an act of Congress, Puerto Rico became a U.S. territory, and its people were granted statutory citizenship, an act of Congress. Now, this is a Bill of Rights of Puerto Rico was drafted, and they created a local government with an executive, legislative, and judicial branch. At the time of enacting the Bill of Rights, Congress also declared Puerto Rico's official language to be English, but Spanish is the main language spoken on the island. I was asked to share positive and not so positive experiences living in Brainerd. As a person from a different ethnicity, some of the things that I find refreshing about the area is the majority of people are polite. They wave and say hello. The area is beautiful, and there's a lot of outdoor activities. I also find that there's a strong sense of community, and while I'm aware that this is likely a common experience for everyone of all ethnicities, I just wanted to reinforce these. As for the negatives, I have unfortunately experienced what I have come to label as covert biases. So it's bigotry mostly disguised as sarcasm, microaggression, disinterest, or dismissal. Since many don't realize that Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, I have several times been asked about my citizenship status, and it has even been hinted to me on more than one occasion that I married my American husband for papers. Some examples of microaggressions I have endured are comments such as, "I didn't notice you were from another culture," which is not a compliment. I have also heard, "You don't look Puerto Rican. When did you come to America? You speak English well. I can't hear your accent. I can hear your accent. They imitate my accent." And ask, "What are you?" Although these comments seem innocuous, they are hurtful because they set a line of demarcation and can often reveal hidden biases. One of my greatest disappointments has been my interaction with some of the professionals in the mental health field. These interactions have included microaggressions, disrespect towards my culture, and an overall lack of interest or ignorance about my culture. This is disappointing because as advocates and licensed professionals, we are required to be culturally competent. I do want to state that I have personally addressed some of the individuals and some of the offenses, but doing so often results in further disenfranchisement. So most of the time, I just don't. I'm grateful for the invitation to share through this forum, and I understand that these conversations are difficult. But I hope that ultimately, these can lead to honest discussion. And as a final statement, I want to encourage everyone to be open to learn and be curious about other cultures. If you don't know what to ask, it's okay to say so. I believe most of us are okay with respectful inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Severson. Next is Charles Black Lance.
told me I have 25 minutes. So we will do our best to honor that. Again, my name is Charles Blacklance. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, and the Rosenmeier Forum for doing this important discussion and opportunity. And I was very excited to be a part of this, and honored to be with all of my fellow panelists as well. I'm quite honored to be with them. Again, my name is Charles Blacklance. I'm the director of TRIO programs here at Central Lakes College. Woo-hoo. And I've worked there for about probably 18 years, 19 years now. And I worked 5 years before that, right out of grad school, with another institution within Minn State. So I've been in academia for a lot of years. And it's a big part of who I am. And always a backdrop on some of the scenarios I'm going to share with you here tonight. I'm also a husband. My wife, Catherine, works here at Central Lakes College as well. And then I'm a father of 3 children. My oldest is 14, my middle child is 12, and my youngest is 10. I am Lakota and Ojibwe. And again, all of that is important to who I am, as well as my being a believer in Christ Jesus. I was saved at the age of 12. With that being said, I was asked to share a few things as it relates to my particular race or background, ethnic background, skin color, however you want to define that. And I'd like to share a few of those stories with you all tonight. When I was 13 years old, actually I was 12, I was just starting to play travel sports in the small town where I grew up. Grew up in northwest Minnesota, and pretty extreme northwest Minnesota actually, but some really good people there. I grew up in the Red River Valley, and I was very pleased to grow there. It's a big part of who I am. So what I'm going to share with you, I don't want what I'll share with you to define that area, but it is a part of what I grew up with. And when I was 12, I guess out on the basketball court, I was a bigger kid, and probably not with the waistline that I had now, but athletic back then. And I played really hard. And when it came to halftime, well, first off, my parents always traveled with my brother, my sister, and I when we'd go to travel sports. And looking back, I don't know if that was as much general interest, or as now as I become a parent, or as I've been a parent, if some of that is for protection of their children as well. And I think there's a little of both, at least for Catherine and I with our children. But back to when it was a halftime of the 7th grade basketball game, and I go into the locker room, and our coach wasn't in the locker room yet at that point. And following me into the locker room was a father of the person that I was playing or guarding on the 7th grade court. And he was pretty upset with the way that I was playing. But he followed me right into the locker room, or actually confronted me in the locker room, and caught the rest of my players off guard, or my teammates. I grew up in a community that was all white except for my American Indian family. And this is not something that they'd seen before, but he confronted me not just on my style of play, that's one thing, but he confronted me about my skin color and the fact that I'm American Indian. He used different language than that, but he got into my face. And unfortunately, my dad's been around that block a few times, and always made it clear not to punch unless you're punched. So I guess I was smart enough to keep my hands to myself at that point, even though he was attempting to grab me and that type of thing. It was interesting because that was the only time at that point where my parents hadn't traveled with me out of town. We're about maybe 30 miles away from the community that I grew up in. So it was an unfortunate situation. And eventually, what seemed like about 45 minutes, but probably about maybe 5 minutes, our head coach came in and handled the situation and drug the father out of the locker room. So he sat down, gave us a pep talk about what we needed to do on the court, and then we moved on. And unfortunately, I wish I could share with you that that was the only time that type of situation happened. It wasn't. But something that I realized pretty early on when it came to my skin color is people were allowed to be aggressive and really over the top and even physical at times. And then, at least I can only own my experience, is I'm just asked or assumed that I'll just move on at the age of 12. With my parents not in the gym. When I look back, that's the one story, although I've shared this before, my dad isn't necessarily a person to go on a lot of social media, and we lost my mom about 6 years ago. But I never told my parents that story. And I'm okay with that. Just with knowing the experiences that they went through, just raising us in that particular community, which I love. But the interesting thing about being American Indian, raised where I was, is that I love that community where I grew up in. I wouldn't have changed much about that area. But yet, even within an area that you love so deeply, you can be scarred so much as I may have been, or my brother and my sister and my parents. And it's kind of an awkward reality when you think about it. And then as I become a parent, it's really important, I felt, that I do my best to shield my children against such aggression. So, and I'll save that for another topic or another conversation. But a few things that I wanted to share is some positives as well, and is through the realities, especially this day and age, or the current age we're in, with some of the verbal aggression, the social media aggression, the all-out aggression that happens to myself with some of the paths that I've chosen in my life, is it continues to be just as lonely today as it was when I was 12 years old in that gym locker room. But the reality that I struggle with most today when it comes to race relations and being a little bit different is that a big part that I shared with you earlier is Christ Jesus is a significant part of my life. And the more aggressive, the more attacking individuals have been, especially in the last probably year and a half, it's always been disappointing with those brothers and sisters that will hear that, but lay silently in the weeds. That's been a frustrating reality of this day and age. I've developed a thick enough skin through the years, unfortunately or fortunately, that the words themselves don't hurt necessarily. I'll admit I just kind of move on with my life because I'm used to a lot of those words, as probably a lot of my counterparts here are. But the difficult part are those around me that choose to sit this one out. That's a difficult place to be. With that being said, it isn't all bad. There's been a number of people in my life that in the last year have really stood up, stood forward, and supported Catherine and I. Outside of the typical players that are always at the forefront of their support with us, for Catherine and I. And like my coworkers at work, my boss, administration, that sort of thing at Central Lakes College, they're always there, which is awesome. But a number of people have kind of come out of nowhere at times and to be supportive of the life that I lead, that I choose to lead, and that, or maybe choose to outwardly lead. Can't really change the fact that I'm American Indian and handsome. That's something that was thrust upon me when I was young. But the one thing, just as I'm wrapping up, is that a lot of these individuals that have stepped forward in my life over the last year and a half come from the most unique places. From leadership of churches or pastors of churches that I've never attended, which has been significant and awesome. And even during the, I guess, the darkest days that I've experienced over the last year and a half, some of those individuals that reached out over the miles. I have a good friend that reached out to me from California, and I haven't visited with him for about 30 years, but he just felt it important to reach out and to encourage me that I am indeed fighting the good fight, and that was helpful and nice and touching. Finally, it's important for me to share that there also are some realities with my children. That's probably the biggest reality of being a person of color for me, an indigenous person, is I married a gal who's beautiful, intelligent, strong, and she was, or is, 100% German. So, but when we got married, and again, I'll try not to unpack this, but is the reality of the pushback that we received, or the concerns that people had. Well, what happens if your child's mixed race? Then what? That's going to be hard for them. Why would you want to do that? To thrust that upon them. Those type of conversations. My eldest was told in kindergarten or first grade, I forget which it was now. No, it's first grade, that Indians are stupid and lazy, not worth anything. And that's a hard one to stomach as a parent. My middle child last year was told at school that people don't want to be like her because she's of a skin color that she actually isn't, but a certain skin color that and was mocked at school. So those are all difficult things. Part of my life is to be in positions where I can have a voice and play a part to make sure that that doesn't happen to other kids. And I'm excited about that. Final thought is one of the things we hope as a parent and expect is that our children are going to be better than us. And I've always believed that my son, mainly due to personality, intelligence, but also confidence and ability to articulate that's outside of his years, found out today that he was chosen for student council at Forest View Elementary or middle school. So I'm pretty excited about that. I don't know if I shared with you, but I'm on the school board here in Brainerd as well. So I've always felt that if there's going to be a U.S. Senator in our house, it probably wouldn't be me. But I really believe that young man is is well on his way. So there's definitely some positives and along with the negatives.
Thank you, Charles.
Hamitakiapi, Chante washteye, Nape chuzapi, Yahipi kin washteye. Dakota ia, Wakampie iltankawi, Imakiapi, Washichu ia, Toya Ross Sullivan, Imakiapi, Pajihu Dazizi, Edwatie. Hi, I greet you all with a handshake and a humble heart. I'm glad that you're all here tonight. My Dakota name is Sacred Sitting Changes Positions Woman. My English name is Toy Ross Sullivan. I come from the place where they dig yellow medicine. I think that's very important to let you know that for myself, I stand up here as a half Black, half Native American woman. I also stand up here as a child of a military serviceman, a military service woman, a police officer. And those are what encompasses my family. My dad is a Black man who was in the military, who was a law enforcement officer. My mom served as a third-generation sailor. Those are important to me because that's what I feel is the backbone of who I am. I'm an American. I'm Black, I'm a woman. I identify first and foremost as a Native American. Why? Because I have culture, I have language, I have traditions, I have ways that I bring up my children. I'm also a preacher's kid. I was brought up in the church, but also with spirituality and my culture. Before this forum, I was feeling uneasy. So what did I do? I called my family. We have a family chat. I said, we need to pray. I got out my smudge bowl. I said, we need to smudge because that is who I am. I've been in the Brainerd Lakes area, specifically Staples and Motley, since 2008, which was a very tumultuous year to come to this area. Growing up in Granite Falls, Minnesota, which is a predominantly white town with an outside reservation, and that's where I was brought up. But moving here with no friends, no family, I was literally like a fly in buttermilk. And I say that because as I walked through the halls at CLC in Staples, where I attended college, it was during the elections of the first Black man. So being in a very different area from where I was brought up, hearing some of those comments, hearing, oh, we don't need this or we don't need that, and I'm sitting here with no one that looks like me. So learning to be a voice and be an advocate for students that look like me over in Brainerd or in my children's school district, that was really important to me. But also being that voice. I am a mother to 6 children, 3 white daughters, very white, blonde hair, blue eyes, 5 feet tall daughters. I have 3 half white, quarter Black, quarter Native sons that stand 6'4", 6'2", and I don't know, whatever a 7-year-old is. My kids range from 7 to 20. And knowing that I had to raise them in a small area, it was both a blessing and a curse. And I say that because they've all been here since birth or kindergarten, and they are now, 4 of them are graduated. So they grew up with the cops' kids, they grew up with the mayor's kids, they grew up with the preacher's kids. They were all in athletes, or they were all in athletics. All of them were 2- and 3-sport athletes through school. So everyone got to know them. Everyone got to know me. 2008 was a long time ago. But when I moved there were tons of looks and stares and why is this woman here? What is she doing? What is she gonna do? How many more are coming? And so those are some of the fears that I had because I left an area where I was brought up, where I had friends, family, a safety bubble, and coming into this area and knowing that I had to start that bubble all over again. So with my children, trying to make sure that they understood who they were, what their traditions were, what their parents thought, how we were going to support them. That was our safety bubble. My kids can walk down the street, my kids can go into a store and have no fears. And that's more so for my boys. My girls can go wherever they want. But my boys, they are still safe because everyone knows them. Everyone knows that they come from a good home. They come from a loving home. There's not drug addiction in our home. There's not criminal activity in our home. But that's in our community. And so we feel very fortunate in that. We go 7 miles down the road, that might not be the case. my kids come to Brainerd, and that might not be the case. So I think, with understanding and being more aware of, yeah, we're here. We're not all what you see in social media, in movies, what your friends said on Facebook or things like that. Just kind of understanding that, being open and being aware that, there's intelligence, there's integrity, there's honesty, there's excellence everywhere. You just have to be willing to look past what's on the outside. So I have other stories for the negative, but I want to leave it on a positive and make sure that this is short and sweet.
Thank you, Claire. Next is Jim Russell.
Well, where'd I start? I guess I'm the oldest guy here, huh? Been here since 1997, and I want to thank Sally for hiring me. I don't think she remembers me, but she saw me in the hallway that day, and she comes right at me and she says, "What are you doing here?" And I think back then, I can probably count a handful of people of color. And so anyways, thank you. I also want to thank my colleagues that are here. I coach basketball, I'm athletic director, and I love my department. They're the best in the nation. They do it because they do it with such passion, such heart. And that's why I'm here. Charles, you're right, it is lonely. There's a lot of times in our life it's very lonely. I am full-blooded Vietnamese. I came to the United States when I was about 9. My mother remarried I call him my father. He was born in Des Moines, Iowa, and anyways, he brought us back in 1973 before the war ended. And so, again, I'm blessed, and I'm lost a lot of times because I don't know who I am. I'll be really honest with you. But I do know this. I love this country. I love that I can call this my home. And I love that all of you guys are out here. Because right now we're going through some hard times. But I do have a lot of stories I can tell, and I do have a lot of things I can share with you. But I think the most important thing I learned from all this, all these years, is that the reason I love what I do is because it's about life of opportunities. And thank God I got that opportunity. I'd like to thank the Vietnam vets that are maybe here, that are listening. If it wasn't for them, I probably would be there and probably be dead. My country now is communist. I hear it's beautiful. I won't go out I won't go visit yet. I can tell you stories about that as well. But most of all, I'm happy. I got a beautiful family. My job gives me an opportunity to motivate, but gives me an opportunity to give them life lessons so that we can grow together. Not a lot of us get a chance to do that, and I do. And I do, and my team, if you ever come watch my team, we are all from different places, and we're all different sizes and all different colors, okay? Well, I take that back. They all have to be taller than me, though, so that's the only recruiting tool law I have when it comes to recruiting. But, with that being said, when do I have most difficult time with race is when somebody is uncomfortable, or somebody that doesn't like you, or somebody that comes out and straight out and says who you are. I didn't feel different until I was about 27 years old. I mean, when I was a kid, everybody made fun of me, your eyes and all that. I beat them all up, by the way, but I was big at this time, 5th grade, I was this size, and I And I knew how to fight, so, that didn't scare me to pick on. People picked on me, I beat them up. It's just the way it is. But I really didn't feel different until I was about 27 years old. I was working at college, and this athletic director came up to me and says, I don't like Vietnamese. I pretty much said, well, thanks, now I know. But then he started doing some things that it's not right. When you feel like it's hurtful or you feel like it's, backstabbing, whatever it is, it's time to leave, So I left. But what really hurt, so I left, and I also left coaching, I left everything. And I was like, wow, is this how adults are supposed to behave? What did I ever done to deserve that? All I've done is work, love what I do. And that was the other problem we had too, even under this roof. I had somebody told me one day that, hey, you're not African American, you're not Caucasian, so be quiet. Don't cause any trouble. Your job is to do your job and keep your mouth shut. You believe it or don't believe it, But every day we have to fight. Every day we have to fight the battle. I don't want to call it fight. We all have battles, I think that's how I look at it. We all have different things we have to go through in life. Some I have to do more than others. It is what it is. But boy, there's so many positives. And like I said, I'm so grateful. I also use it for me. Every high school gym I go to, since I've been here for 23 years, 24, they all know, hey, that's a coach from Central Lakes College. There's the little guy. So I use that to my advantage. I love going to people's homes to visit their kids, because they'll never forget me. Good or bad, they won't forget me. So yes, I do. I use that to my advantage. I use a lot of things to motivate me. You have to, I think, to survive in life. I still have cards. I still have cards and emails that people wrote me in 1997. You don't belong here. This is community college. Don't bring any black kids here. What did I do? Look at me. I'm still that part I'm pretty proud of, because guess what? I'm probably one or very few head college coaches that are full-blood Vietnamese or Asian. So, like I said, I used it to my advantage. But, like I said, I thank you for all being here and wanting to listen to us. It's good. Is this going to be, is life going to be better for us and all that? You know what? With social media, I think it's more, people are more aware, okay? People might talk about it a little bit more, but I also think the other side could be too much. Let's shut down. Let's go back to old way as well. So there's give and take either way. But you got to kind of look at things, on a positive note. Like Charles said, he's got 3 kids. I have 3 kids, all in college, or one graduated, and he's teaching down the road, but 2 still in college. They all work their butts off in school, and they're all great in their sports. They're great in the community, but all 3 of my kids hated their high school. Explain that to me, please. You can't. I don't know how many times I've cried, can't explain it to my kids. Why did this person make that decision? Why did this teacher make that decision? Why did this coach make that decision? Dad, I work hard. I do well in school. I help others. All the things we want to teach our kids to be right, and then people treat them like they're different. just rips my heart apart. And it rips my heart apart when my team has the same problem in town. Coach, I went to the store the other day and they kept following me. Coach, the lady wouldn't give me change in my hand. She just drops it down. Coach, I can't go in the restaurant because they don't want to feed me. That gets tough. That gets really tough. Because they're kids. They're kids, and I do, and I know all my colleagues, everybody that works here, we want to help them. We want to make sure they're comfortable. We want to see them grow. That's our purpose. But some people don't want that. And that's why it's tough. But we can't stop and just cry about it. We got to move on. We got to go forward. And like I said, I'm blessed with the people we have here. I'm blessed with the people I work with, and they're now starting to help, starting to see, and that's what it's about. Just be aware. Be aware, because kids are kids, you know. You know, my dad adopted me, and before he passed away, I got a chance to talk to him heart to heart, because as I grew up, there's a lot of stuff being said. You know, my mom married him because she's using him so we come to the United States, and you know, that kind of stuff. You got help from the United States because you're Vietnamese, and et cetera, et cetera. You know, it's the money, you get all the money, use up all the money, and look at you now. None of that happened, but that's how we were looked upon. But my dad did say something, and I share this with you because I think all of us should do all the same. I asked him before he passed away, I said, Dad, why'd you adopt me? He says, I didn't adopt you. You're my son. You're my son. And I treated you like my son. No different. You're my blood. You're my family. With that being said, that's how I think people should treat everybody. You know, you said the Lord, Christ, we all should be a family, right? So, but anyways, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you to all the panelists. These are not easy things to talk about, and I appreciate you being here tonight. We do have some more questions before we accept some questions from the audience. And I'll just throw these out, and you folks can just jump in and answer them as you see fit.
If anybody needs a card and a pencil and would like to submit a question, just please raise your hand.
Good. Yeah, and then you'll collect them later. All right. Panelists, when you think of Brainerd area institutions, such as the city or the county government, the churches, the schools, what changes could be made to increase the voice and the power of people of color? And just anyone? Any changes you'd like to see?
Could you read it again?
When you think of Brainerd area institutions, such as city or county government, churches, schools, what changes could be made to increase the voice and the power of people of color?
I think you need to hire different people. I do understand that we hire what's best, right? But the problem with our society is that the hire the best is usually the daughter or son that's just been there all their life. You need to change it up. You need to change it up, and you need to bring people from outside, if that's what you're really truly looking for. So you can have a diverse committee or diverse leadership. You know, I had to do I forget what it is, but we had to go find some people of color in our community that are leaders, that are educators, and are educated, and can't find any. and I know they're out there, but nobody wants to change. And I understand that. I mean, everybody gets comfortable and be comfortable in this community, and they don't want change in the community. I understand that. But if you're going to ask that question about how do we do it, well, I think you have to hire out and hire people that are different and are willing to make that change in the environment. I mean, when I came here in '97, I go down to the park, and I can count on my hands, and I knew every kid of color out there. You know, and nowadays it's changing a little bit, but your leadership hasn't changed. So hopefully I answer your question, but I think you have to change the culture and you have to change the leadership.
Does anyone else care to weigh in on that?
I think where I sit is that in all the areas that you reference, my opinion is that everyone needs to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Until that happens, we're not going to get anywhere.
Anyone, any other comments or thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm sorry, but I'll give you an example. You know, in our athletic department, we don't have coaching staff, a lot of coaches that are of color, except for me. But I coach men's basketball. 80% of my roster is African-American or different cultures. And everybody wants change. Everybody wants, you know, diversity. Diversity, we all talk about it, but we never do anything. So guess what I do? I brought my Brandon Bell here. He's got a college degree, willing to come all the way up here to have an opportunity to coach. You know, you got to make that effort. And I thank him to come here and do this, because I know that's out of his comfort zone. You know, when he talked about in the cities, I'm going up to Brainerd, they're all like, what? Why? You know, well, he wants to get in college coaching. He wants to get an opportunity to do what he loves to do and make a difference in lives. You know, I don't have hardly any money to hire him, but they're out there. Out there, you just got to make that effort, and I think that's the key.
I'll direct this question to Clarabelle, and you can all weigh in if you care to. What is your definition of diversity, and is it a worthwhile goal for institutions to be striving to achieve?
Can you hear me? The definition of diversity, I would say it's people with different ideas, different cultures, different backgrounds, getting together, I would say. And what was the second part?
And why is this something we should strive for?
Well, because it's a reality, and I think, and as I said before, I think part of the problem that I find living here in this area is there's not enough curiosity about other cultures. There is it's almost insular with respect with, you've gotten so used to just being this, you know, just homogenous culture, and when someone from another culture comes in, it's either a threat or there's just a lack of interest, and there's no curiosity. And I also noticed that there's almost a fear of admitting that you are not open or you don't understand other cultures, and then the conversations don't happen, and so we feel isolated. I would say that it is important, and diversity just means, you know, different people, different thoughts, different cultures. When I moved here, you know, you do have a definite culture here in Brainerd and Minnesota. And so I did immerse myself in the culture and try to learn about it. And I just don't find that is reciprocal.
Okay. Any other thoughts on diversity and why we should be striving for it?
So, to piggyback off Dr. Severson, for me, I think of it as, you know, it's racial, it's ethnic. It's religious, it's sexuality, it's a whole bunch of different things, and just kind of understanding where everyone is coming from. It's going to be different than you. I'm looking out at the audience, and there's only a handful of people that look like us. And then just knowing that we have value, those students have value, those neighbors have value. One of the activities I do with my students here at the school is having them, and so some of you students don't go into your little projects and be the know-it-all anymore. But what I do with them is I give them a few sheets of paper and some tape, and I say, I want you guys to build something. I want you to build the biggest tower. And while you're doing this, that's your only rule, is use the materials that you have. And sometimes they break off in groups, sometimes they're in pairs, but they don't have any restraints on what they can do. And so I just tell them, okay, build a tower. Use the people around you, use the materials you have, and build a tower. And I give them a time limit to do so. And I'm watching as they stick to what they know. They stick to who they know. And then at the end, the whole purpose of this lesson is you have all these different groups that are in this room, and you guys could have all worked together and built one tower. Everyone has value. Everyone has ideas. It's not a very, life is not 2 + 2 is 4, and that's the only answer. You have to think outside the box. You have to use the resources you have. Well, there's 1 + 3 is 4. There's 0 + 4. So just kind of knowing that you can talk to other people. You are not stuck with just what you know, and being open to those kind of things. That's what I have.
Did you have a question on that, Jim? Did you something to add?
Well, I think it comes down to we don't understand it. You know, like she said, both of you said that it's a different viewpoints, different people, different thoughts. Well, I've been here for 24 years, and the chancellor's office has said diversity in the top 3 every year. The top 3 every year. These are things we need to work on, and diversity is always up on top. And I always ask the same question: is it for here, or is it for Minneapolis Community College? Is it for Anoka Community College? I don't think people understood what it was. But as Mary Sam has been our diversity director, things have changed. And since Hara's been, but things have changed, and they're making effort at it. But I think down deep, we talk a lot about diversity, but do we really know how to make that change? Or do we really know how to implement that into your business, your school, your town? I think that's the big question: is what is diversity, and how do you go about it?
I have another question. What changes would you like to see in the way that law enforcement interacts with people of color?
Well, I think I have a number of experiences I could go with. Good and bad. You might want to put me on a bit of a timer. But yeah, I've had some pretty unique experiences over the years with law enforcement. Fortunately, a lot of them good as well. I probably won't go into necessarily sharing stories at this point. Just assume that there's been good things and there's been bad things with law enforcement. But a few two scenarios I think that has been really helpful to me has been when I first moved to Brainerd, and I've shared this quite a bit, is my wife and I were walking down the street before work, and she was pregnant with my oldest child, Olivia, and we had just moved into an area of the community that pretty certain I was the only dark person in that quadrant of the community, and I was just coming off of a situation where I'd get checked. My car would get checked a few times. I'd come home for lunch, and a squad car would pull me over and check me for mail, U.S. mail, because he had heard that my car fit the description that was stealing mail, which If I were to steal mail, I don't think I'd do it in my bright blue car in broad daylight over the lunch hour. But anyhow, and then when I was walking home, I gave my wife a kiss, and she's not Indian, she's German, and I started walking back to my house. And a squad car went by, and just during that time, and decided to follow me. And this was just a unique and awkward situation. Just proceeded to follow me back to my house, where Catherine and I lived. And at that point, it was a good 9 minutes. He followed me, and then after I got to my car at my residence, he just kept going. And but there's a cul-de-sac at the end of the road, and at that point I was like, all right, this is enough. This is getting awkward. People are gonna start talking if I keep having these run-ins with law enforcement. And so I knew he was gonna have to come back my way, so I drove down, flagged him down, introduced myself to the individual, and just said, hey, I'm Charles. I'm new to the area. I know I don't fit the demographic to this particular area of the community, but I'm hopefully here to stay. And but they're a little bit taken back, but willing to visit with me a little bit. And I have to say, moving after that, not that that was any big step in this person's life, but I really have enjoyed where the Brainerd Lakes community has come from there. Not saying it's perfect. It's not necessarily. But anyway, with that being said, the other piece is that, and this is my point, is we were out in South Dakota, and Rapid City, South Dakota, and quite honestly, my dad's from that way. My dad's a full-blood Lakota from South Dakota, and he'd always say, well, just be careful when you go through Rapid City. So I did, and I was. And Catherine and I rolled up into downtown a couple of years ago, probably about 2 years ago, pre-COVID, and to a store my wife and daughter were wanting to go to, kind of a knick-knack type of store. And Olivia, my oldest, was excited to be there, so she opened up the door. Well, as many of you open up a door, it gets to that spring where, you kind of try to open it softly, but then it's going to open up a little further just on its own. So Olivia, who at that point I think was 12, kind of bumped the car next to us. And I was getting out of the car, but by the time I got out, there's a woman screaming at my 12-year-old daughter obscenities, race, or about her skin color. The only way I was standing out there at that point in time, so she obviously saw that I was there. And it was a really awkward, frustrating situation. I'll be very honest with you. I made every effort to keep my wife in the car at that point, because I didn't want my wife to get a hold of that lady and make this into a worse situation than it already was. So that played itself out. Had Catherine and the kids go in and just do some shopping. The woman was insistent on calling the cops, and there wasn't any door ding or anything that I could tell. But she felt it important that we committed some sort of crime and that law enforcement had to come. So sure enough, 2 squad cars come up over a door ding, which I didn't think is the oddest thing to me. But this woman just kept screaming and defining who I was, what I looked like, and the fact that I'm American Indian, but in a lot less polite terms. And at that point, I was getting a little bit frustrated. And he came, pulled me aside, and said, "Hey, what's going on?" But before he said anything else, he shared, "I just want you to know, I see you're American Indian." He goes, "I think that's really neat. And I just want you to know I went through some training the last year or so, and I learned a lot about Indigenous people. And I really would just love, in a different setting, to visit with you about that, because I've just learned a lot and have a lot more questions, but really, really admire the background that you're a part of. But also I understand the importance," he said, of how that affects this type of situation. So, and I'm really summarizing kind of what he said, but in the end, I sure appreciated how this fella handled it. It was a really goofy, awkward situation, but I felt that the training that he took, or that he took it to heart, and he was able to apply it in a very real situation. And I really appreciated that. And I think that's a good scenario of where I'd love law enforcement to continue. I know they're doing their best. Being here at CLC, we've done our part in educating and standing alongside law enforcement as they continue to grow in those areas of race relations. But anyway, so I went on to my uncle's after that situation, and I told my uncle what had happened, and he said, yeah. He said, that's Rapid City for you. But he goes, he said, Rapid City really made an effort a couple years before that, I guess, to really begin educating their law enforcement. And I really appreciated that. And I could only go off the experience that I had, that they definitely had made an effort. And I would just like law enforcement to continue going in the road in which they've been heading.
Any other thoughts about improvements any one of you might have liked to see within law enforcement?
For myself, what I would personally like to see is more cultural competency training. It would be beneficial if they were required to have to serve some amount of time in a non-white area, in a population that's different than their own, where they went to school, where they were brought up, just so that they were exposed to that lifestyle, those different environments. But just being more aware of, it's not just, the Andy Griffith show over here. But I think that there is movement going forward, but there's also still a bunch of setbacks, especially in this area. I was talking to someone earlier, and I was talking about the experiences of my children. Previously, I said that I have white daughters and mixed sons. Both have been pulled over. My daughter for speeding, and she just got a warning. No checking, no anything like that, just making sure she had a license or insurance, and that was fine. But then my son, who was 19 at the time, got pulled over, and he was asked to step out of his car. They searched his car. He had a white friend with him, and they continued to ask him, where are you coming from? And him and his friend were on their way back from the cities from a shopping trip. And they asked for his ID. They saw that he was from a small rural town here. And they said, where is this license from? And he said, this is where I grew up. And they said, well, who are your parents? He explained who his parents were. They're like, well, who are they? What do they do? So my son proceeded to say, my dad works in in the electrical supply, and my mom works at the college. The cop then says, oh, so you do come from a good family then? And he's like, yeah. But my daughter was pulled over in the same town. No questions asked. So I think just being aware and letting people know that, again, what you see is not always what you get. I did a speaking engagement earlier this week for another class, and I made them judge me upon walking in. I gave them a worksheet. I said, you don't know me. I'm not going to introduce myself until this activity is done. And just some of the things that they had to say, they were pretty positive, but they felt uncomfortable having to judge me. But that's what we do to each other all the time. So just maybe changing those negative judgments as people, law enforcement officers, neighbors, but just kind of getting more educated in the fact that we are all mixing.
Okay, thank you. Many years ago, Ralph Ellison wrote a book about race called The Invisible Man. Do you ever feel invisible, or do you feel that you're in the spotlight all the time?
Invisible?
I feel like I'm in the spotlight.
I would say both. Sometimes invisible, sometimes in the spotlight.
Okay.
I think it all depends on how people look at each one of us individually. Like I said earlier in my story, one of my boss told me I'm supposed to be quiet. It's supposed to be invisible.
It's kind of a interesting, it's an interesting question, or thought that's asked, especially, I like what everybody said, but what Jim says is, one time I was at, I got sent out to, this is gonna skew, Mid-State and, for some, but I got sent out to Hawaii for a training that I had to do a number of years ago. And I said no to my boss at the time 4 times. I can't do it. And he said, finally, in the end, he said, no, you got to go. And but I was working with the system office at that time for a couple of years, and I needed to go out there for a national conference to present. And but the reason I said no was my wife Catherine was just about to have our first child, Olivia, and. Anyway, but he said I got to go, and I was able to bring Catherine with and Olivia. But we jumped onto this plane, and it was to a national indigenous conference. I can't remember the exact name of it. But my point is that I got on the plane, and I was surprised. There's a bunch of Shinabs, a bunch of Indians looking at me, smiling. And and I told Catherine, this is uncomfortable for me. I'm not used to being around so many Indian people. I'm used to being the only dark person, or the only good-looking dark person in a room, and there's a whole plane full of them. But anyway, my point is that I'll admit at times I've gotten used to being the only person of color, or the only person that represents an aspect of diversity, and I won't deny that there's a certain amount of comfort with that at times, because that's become such a part of my identity. But it's also, I think, a reality of how we tend to probably make lemonade out of lemons, that type of thing as well.
You know, I say invisible. I can give you an example of this real quick. But you also got to remember, everybody has feelings. You can't take that away. You can't hide that. How we feel or how we treated is what's here. And that's, if we can express that, then we're not invisible. But like in my job as a basketball coach, I face this every year. The referees will come shake my assistant coach's hand, won't shake my hand. They don't believe I'm a coach. I let them know, though, by the way. They don't believe I'm the head coach. Doing this in this league for 23 years, there's still coaches. The referees will come up, will not shake my hand. Of course, you know, all my assistants are taller and everything else, right? But they won't come shake my hand. Yeah. But at the end of the game, they know who the head coach is, though. But I'm just saying, the invisible part of it is how they look at you. You don't exist, you know. And if you do exist, we're going to let you know who you are. You know, so those are just some, you know, just some culture stuff that you know we all gone through. I mean, we've all been different places that yes, we're visible, and we've all been places that are like nobody wants to know that you're there. So, but
I think I stay visible because, like Jim was saying earlier, you know, wanting people in certain positions in certain areas, we have to want to be there. So for me, where I'm at, I want to be here. When I was a student here and no one looked like me, there was no one for me to talk to, I wanted to be here. So in my position, with being able to mentor and support students of color or athletes or people with disabilities or anything like that, I make myself visible. And I've had to do that my whole life. After my parents left the military, I had to go to an all-white school. There was a handful, sprinkle of people that were not white. And so there was an older student who was my mentor so that I had someone to talk to. She graduated, now I'm the big kid. Other students are coming in, Toy, can you pay it forward? So I did. And then I joined different organizations so that I could be that advocate for people. So being Black, being Native, there's different things that go on throughout the year that I make sure that I'm involved in, so that I make sure that my students have a safe space, so that they know that someone's advocating for them. So that's why I say I'm in the spotlight or I'm picked on or I'm that person because I choose to be that person. I choose to be visible for people that need that advocate.
I just wanted to add, when I actually say invisible, it's most of the time because if I bring something up of some offense, it's either dismissed or I'm told I'm too sensitive, that I misinterpret it. And so in that way, I feel invisible. That's what I was talking about.
Thank you. All four of you, to some degree, have been involved in education. Do you feel that in your own education you received a fair and accurate representation of America's past in terms of its relationship between races?
Absolutely not.
Can you elaborate?
Again, with my own education, with military, white schools, college, things like that, I was talking about like even my children. We are in a time where we can start celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day and going away with Columbus Day. We can celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. We can do all these different things, and I want that, and I encourage my children and I teach my children these things because they're not being taught that in their schools. Or if they are, it's, okay, let me just say the bare minimum and move along so that they can meet the quota that, yes, we talked about this. But in my own education, what I learned after coming into this area, like, again, no one looked like me. No one even looked like my sisters who are lighter. But we would try and, my mom would keep us home on Martin Luther King Day because our school still had classes. It was not observed. And when we would get unexcused because our school district said, no, this is an unexcused absence. And my mom, as the non-Black parent who was observing this, was like, well, you can just unexcuse my child. But I try to advocate for my children. Like, we're doing surveys with them being Native American children, but there's no Native American programming. They have nothing going on, and I try to advocate to their like Native American liaison who has never returned a phone call or an email, and doesn't have any like ethnic background to support these children. So I think like for myself and my kids, like it's just non-existent, and I don't know where the disconnect is and why this isn't happening.
Anyone else care to weigh in about education? And
I went to school in Puerto Rico, and that's what I learned, the history of Puerto Rico. So I
was
don't
that
have that experience.
was that
It was accurate based on what our history is.
okay?
I remember when I was in ninth grade, I think it was, my sister went away to college. And her coming back and sharing so much new information that she shared about being American Indian and some of those realities outside of the small community I grew up in, or the families on both my mom and my dad's side that I grew up part of. And she was so excited about it, and all I did as a younger brother is made fun of her that she seemed odd. But looking back, and once I got to college myself, I found myself spending hours on end looking at microfiche. If anybody knows what microfiche is, that's commitment to be looking up stuff on microfiche. But anyhow, looking up information on the American Indian movement and what happened in Wounded Knee, the small community in South Dakota. And anyway, but the reason why that was so interesting to me was I remember my dad talking to me when I was a boy that his brothers, my uncles, would ride horseback during Wounded Knee and help bring food and supplies in the cover of darkness. I thought that was such a neat story as a boy. But not realizing at all what my dad was even talking about until I went to college. And I think I had a pretty good history teacher, honestly. I really do. One of the people through the last year and a half that's reached out to me to tell me to just do something to people that I shouldn't do. but is my teacher that I had in history. So I think he had it going on back then, but even still, there's aspects of who I was that was just not included. And but anyway, the reality that the American Indian movement, the what they did, the realities of that, just really, my eyes were open to that when I went to college, because growing up as a boy, some simple things that really should be looked at as important just were never shared.
Any thoughts, Jim, or has it kind of been, they touch all the bases?
I think they touch most of it.
Okay.
One thing I know about school, I can tell you some. My first year at college, this tells you a little bit about the Asian side. So my mother, I'll go back here. My mother, when we came to the United States, we were at a Catholic church, and we would adopt Vietnamese families coming over on the boats and so forth, and get them started in their life. And it's kind of funny. Mom, I think, kept track of all the kids, and I think probably I'll say 100% of all those kids, they all became doctors, or they became lawyers, or something really smart, you know. And here I am, you know. But I'll never forget my freshman year. I was in the physics class, and there were probably 50 students in there, and there was probably 40 of them Asian. So the teacher kept going down the list, taking roll, right? And he couldn't pronounce any of the names. And of course, me sitting right in front, right there, he kept looking at me, thinking that's my name, or I can help him pronounce the name. Finally, he says, he quits. He goes, "What is your name?" I looked at him and said, "James Russell." I could never miss another class. But school-wise, you know, I'm the first to get a college degree and get a master's degree. But like I said, how people look at it differently. My mother kept track of who should be doctor, how much money you should make, and et cetera, et cetera. And here I go into coaching, teaching. But that's, you know, again, school, college, I believe is always opportunities, and what you do with it is what you do with it, so.
So to all of you, what's the most cringeworthy statement or question that a white person has ever posed to you?
Oh, God, that's loaded.
I think the biggest one is that, not the biggest, but the funny thing is, they always say, "Oh, I got a friend that's black," or "I got a friend that's Asian," or I always say, "Great, but I'm glad you have friends." But
That appears to be kind of a universal. I saw some nodding heads.
yeah, it's just, I don't know. That means they're already looking at you different. I mean, that's what they want. Like I said, that's what they want to do. That's fine. But when you make a statement like that, and so what are you trying to get at? What kind of answers are you trying to get at from us, or what opinion are you trying to get from me, right or wrong? You know, when you say something like that, it's like it makes you think a little bit about who they are. You just turn that around as I have to judge you a little bit about why would you say something like that? You know, a friend is a friend, but I think that's pretty common. As people say, you know, I have a friend that's black or so. But
Any other cringeworthy statements, or have we covered many of them?
I think I covered most of them.
Okay. Let me digress to a different topic. Minnesota has a real serious education achievement gap particularly between blacks and whites, and it's a problem that we've had for a while and have not solved. Do you see anything that can or should, that can be done to fix this problem? Any thoughts?
Well, I think one thing that we need to look at is how we're handling the data. The achievement gap for sure is, there's definitely an achievement gap between for blacks and whites, but there's a whole other group out there that are struggling just as much, if not more, overall, and indigenous people, some other groups as well. I think that right now, which I'm pleased with on some levels, that gap is being heard more and more clearly for some ethnic backgrounds, but there's still a lot of other ethnic backgrounds that aren't necessarily being attended to because our numbers are so small that statistically they may be somewhat moot. So I believe that we need to look at, in our whole education system, need to be looking more specifically at the individual and not necessarily just looking at the groups, because even though there are a lot of students of one particular color, black or indigenous or what have you, we still need to make sure that we understand how to educate them as an individual and taking into account their ethnic background as well. But there's, I think it's just a lot more than simply a black and white issue or a black or a white and indigenous issue. I think that we need to continue to question how we're providing education to these individuals. And then even more importantly, how we're measuring those individuals. For example, and I'll try not to go on, you can keep me going on this for hours, but if you look at gifted and talented individuals, just as an example, gifted and talented for a majority of the individuals in our state, but also throughout the country, are based on a test. Based on a test that maybe all of them are given, but if they don't test well, then they don't make it to that next level. And then if they don't do well there or test well there, then they don't do well. Well, with indigenous people, gifted and talented presents itself so much more differently than it might in the white student, or even than it might in the black student. But right now, there's just one way of measuring gifted and talented, and one way of looking at those statistics. And that, to me, is just a small example of how we can help provide that, attending to that particular education gap.
Well, thank you. Roland, did you happen to harvest any? Okay.
Can they just say it?
While they're, real quickly, maybe I'll ask, can you name any people that you look up to in terms of furthering racial justice, and how have they been effective? And it could be someone you know or someone you just admire from afar. Any personalities or people come to mind?
I visit a lot of inner city schools in the cities. Matter of fact, I really enjoy going down there. Again, it's educational field, but I like visiting with a lot of my colleagues, coaches. They deal with it everyday life, and I just like going down there and just getting my feet in there and hands in there and try to figure out what we can do to help. But also, it's such a learning experience because you don't get anywhere else, you know. So I really look upon them and I lean on them, and you know, we talk quite a bit, and it's all about the working environment, the working area, and those coaches are amazing coaches. And when I say coaches, they don't coach. It's a daycare, it's a babysitting job, it's a fatherhood, it's everything that you don't think of as coach. I mean, a lot of people don't, I should say. So I lean on my friendship quite a bit because they help me. They help me because I bring these kids up here, and they give me some backgrounds and advice on how to handle it and how to handle the situations. So, you know, go right to the source.
Okay. Here's a question from the audience. What do you see as the difference between the civil rights movement of the 60s and the racial climate of today?
Social media.
That's had a big impact, and
Oh, yeah. I think that, I assume, I was born in 72, so I don't remember that part. But looking back but today, I think it's a different, it's a different animal altogether. It's important to take a stance and to put yourself out there. But the reality of social media puts that right in everybody's doorstep in terms of a stance that you might take. Gone are the days where you have to work really hard or go on a freedom cruise or what have you to make a difference. Your voice can be heard if you want, very easily from the comfort of your own bedroom, I guess. But unfortunately, that's the same for the realities of stances we might take as well. So I think that makes a big difference today. Not saying it's any harder than it was then. I know there's some realities back then that were pretty tricky as well.
we're running a little short on time, but I want to get a couple more questions from the audience in. This is from the audience. How should parents and families teach their family more about different cultures? And also, have you ever experienced any problem with people of your race about decisions you've made, and how did you deal with it?
I would say, first of all, travel. When there's community events going on in your area where you don't have to travel far, immerse yourself in those kind of things, whether it's a powwow or a heritage fest or plays, things like that. Just be involved. And the second part was,
Have you ever experienced any problem with people of your race about decisions you've made, and how do you deal with that?
so for myself, I have to walk a very different line than some people, because in the Black community, I'm not Black enough to be Black. In the Native community, I'm not Native enough to be Native. And I'm not Native passing, nor when I'm down south am I Black passing. But in this area, I'm only seen as Black. So for me, just having that, understanding that wherever I'm at, I'm in that gray area. And so that's what I see for myself, but just being very cautious and aware of who I am and how I identify in certain areas.
Okay. I think we're kind of at the point where we should wrap things up. I have one last question, and I guess I'm going to start with Jim and move down toward me. If we meet 10 years from now, is your judgment that racial disparities will be better or worse or the same as they are now?
I guess it depends where I'm living. Honestly, I think it's going to be the same. I think right now we talk about it, and right now it's all in front of us on social media. But I think people get tired of listening to it. People get tired of being judged. People get tired of being. So I think it'll go back the other way. They'll go back and hide and go back and won't say anything. My honest opinion on that, I just don't. Yes, it's just like anything else. It's a big learning curves, and it has its ups and downs. So I say 10 years from now, I don't see a lot of change.
Toy?
I think it depends on area. I think right now with those that are here, you are actively making yourself vulnerable and understanding that there may need to be a change or educating yourself. So I think with that itself, we are forward thinking and, starting with our students or our children and having them have that understanding that, everybody is everybody and, let's try and work together. I think we can be pushing forward, but I also do see that we might be stagnant. But I think just starting small, you guys have the ability for a ripple effect for the positive.
Charles?
I think that I'd like to say we'll be better. I believe we will. I referenced my children, and then I know there's the children of all of us here on the panel. I'm assuming will be strengthened and also be part of that fight. But if I look at it through the lens of the human condition, I would say probably not. Probably won't be better. Just because I think that even if we win the battle of people feeling comfortable with those of us that might be of a darker skin tone, I think the human condition, unfortunately, is such that we'll just find something else to discriminate against. We'll just find something else to be uncomfortable with and go with that. So, but hopefully we can make differences on how we approach those that are different, and that we can make strides in that particular area.
Thank you. And Clarabelle, I think you get the last word on this question.
Great. I actually think that things will get better, but that's because I'm an optimist and I'm a therapist, and if I don't believe in change, then what am I saying about what I do, right?
Thank you very much, panelists. It's been a great conversation, and we appreciate your coming here tonight.
I didn't get any texts yet.
Yeah, me neither.
Why would you get text? Is that a bad thing?